You know I've been around and doing it, but now it's my time to shine and start proving it. I'm losing it, I'm moving it. The city is where I'm made, Bostonian flow, I kick it back there. Yeah, I got game, got in a fan way. We the city of the champs, every sport we play. Spit wetter than the harbor, yeah, I'm flowing like the Charles. I be speeding on this beat, call it Turnpike Miles. Yeah, it's Google signing on, John to the Hancock, and I'm always key, I'm ready to unlock. I be doing big things.
Welcome back, everyone, to the newest edition of Once a Week. I'm Billy J. Ludis, and today we have another incredible guest for you, an incredible guide and a healer for you. Someone that I recently connected with who is creating an impact in a number of areas, but all of which we try to help you with here on Once a Week, because she has spent 20 years in the collegiate sports medicine area, where she began to hone her skills in mental, physical, and emotional health, to where now her passion for understanding the mind and body connection led her to her PhD in mind-body medicine, opening doors to where she now consults with universities, programs, and individuals in the areas of stress management. Our guest today brings so much to the table and to the stages for audiences just as much. We're going to dive into that. And we're going to touch on every single area. Everyone, I give you Sara Beaudry-Wiltse. I hope I got your last name right.
Close. Beaudry-Wiltse. Yeah, Sara
Oh,
Beaudry-Wiltse.
okay, I gotcha. All right.
No, it's a hard one. A lot of my students call me Dr. B-Dubs because it's a hard one to pronounce. So B-Dubs is welcome as well.
That's a perfect nickname. That's awesome.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I
But
don't mind it at all.
being here. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, I know we connected a couple weeks ago or so, and we talked about like speaking for that matter, because you've done speaking aspects, but to see everything you brought to the table and you bring to the table for people, I had to get you on here because I think you bring so much of an impact, but you shine so much of a light to people. And whether it's college athletes, college students, or people, whatever age, you really do, Sara. So again, I thank you so much for being here. But tell us, how did you even get into these areas? Because your passion, much like we talked about prior to even recording, your passion has led you every step of the way. So where does that come from for you?
Yeah, so I got into sports medicine back when I was in high school, actually. And it was never on my radar until we moved when I was 15 years old. And my mom, when she picked me up from work that day, she said, I registered you for classes, and one of them is sports medicine. And I was not excited about it, if I'm really honest.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I thought it was better than freshman PE because, I was a sophomore. So that would have been horrific, right, to be in freshman PE. And she said, you can always transfer out at semester if you want to. And so I was going to do my best. The very first day of class, the instructor, the teacher, was also the athletic trainer at the high school. And she said, if you come and help with water at football practice, I'll give you extra credit. And my plan was to get as much extra credit as I could so I could slack off in this class that I didn't want to be in. And instead, I showed up at football practice and fell in love and wound up going into, like you said, a 20-plus career in sports medicine, mostly in the collegiate setting, but I've, dabbled in other areas as well. And then that led me into higher ed and now medical education as well. So it's all kind of branched off of that decision from my mom. So shout out to my mom for setting me up on the right path. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love how it works together sometimes like that, where the area we least expect opens the biggest door for us sometimes.
Right? Looking back, I think I am not surprised that I fell in love with sports medicine as much as I did.
Mm-hmm.
I think at 15 years old, I wasn't expecting it, but now seeing, developing more as a human and as an adult and realizing like what's important to me, it's really no surprise that sports medicine rose to the top.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us about the sports area. So you've got to help every single sport from what I've read on you. You've helped every single sport, every single college sport. Is there a specific sport that you kind of find your skills, your traits kind of spark more? You get to really dive into things, or is it across the entire board?
So I have done a lot. I've done pretty much every collegiate sport, but then I've done some other fun things too, due to our X Games, some U.S. Taekwondo, some different things like that, where my colleagues have invited me to go help out in other arenas, and that's been a lot of fun. Yeah. I would say I definitely am more drawn towards trauma-based sports instead of overuse injury type sports. So things where there's a lot of contact or collision. I spent 8 years doing collegiate ice hockey right out of the gates, right out of, when I graduated, I went right into 8 years of men's collegiate ice hockey. And I like to say they raised me as an athletic trainer. I got real used to incredibly tough athletes with a lot of trauma-based injuries, closing cuts, on the bench and sending them back into games, letting
Yeah.
people play with broken fingers and wrists even, and it's just, that's kind of what that world is all about. And that's
Yeah.
definitely what I'm drawn to as an athletic trainer. And I'm
It's
really
awesome.
grateful that other sports medicine professionals like to, work distance running and things like that that aren't
Mhm.
as trauma based, because I definitely love the trauma aspect side of it. Yeah.
Yeah. The big stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's not a sprained ankle. It's bigger than
Yeah.
that.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
That's really
Yep.
cool. And I love how that connects to your other areas as well, because whether it's a trauma based aspect in a sport, but much like you describe on your website, on your LinkedIn, for people, we're going to give you those at the end of this interview. But whether someone goes through a physical injury, it affects every other area. Whether it is
Mhm.
mental, whether it is emotional, it could even be spiritual just as much. But now that you've stepped into the mind body medicine area, and that's really become another passion for you, you've got your PhD in that. How are you able to help people in that area while still transfer that to the field or to the rink or to whatever it might be for college sports and any athlete for that matter?
Yeah, I think that sports medicine in general, and I would say even healthcare in general, is
Mm,
really starting to talk more and more about this holistic healthcare.
definitely.
That, I have said for a very long time, even when I was a very young athletic trainer, I remember using the phrase, my athletes are more than athletic machines.
Mm,
And that was always something that was really important to me, and that I definitely saw that they were more than just their physical bodies performing these sports. Everything else was impacting what was going on. If they were having relationship issues, if their parents were getting divorced, if they were having money problems, if they weren't sleeping well, all these different things can impact it. And when I started my PhD, I knew I needed a PhD because I was transferring full time into higher education. And to teach, you need a PhD. So I
right.
started my PhD. And when I was choosing what program I wanted to do, I was really struggling with finding something that I felt like really connected to. There were a
Right.
lot that are adjacent to sports medicine, rehab science or, maybe sports psychology. And that was when I looked at pretty heavily. But then I
Mm,
found one program in the United States that's mind body medicine. And as I was reading through the courses that were a part of that, it really struck me that this is what I want to do, because I had seen in, over 20 years that the mind and stress and emotion, it all has such an impact on our physical bodies. I've seen
mm,
that myself, in my own body and my family, but I absolutely saw it in my athletes. And, I think back to one athlete. He was one of my collegiate soccer players. I had him for 5 years. He redshirted a year, and he had a recurring hamstring strain. And the more we
mm,
worked on this hamstring, it didn't really make sense physiologically why he kept straining
yeah.
this hamstring. And I'd see when he would strain it, and I'm like, that was a jog. That wasn't even like an
Yeah.
explosive action or anything like that. It just wasn't making sense. And I started to see a lot of benefit when we switched over into more body work, like a lot of more hands-on massage. And that was a lot more work for me, a
Yeah.
lot more work for me than just like hooking him up to a machine. But during that time, not only is there the energetic transfer
Right.
from me to him and from him to
Yep.
me, but also the conversations that happened during that
Mm,
treatment
right.
and the connection that happened,
Yep.
and really being able to talk about things and ask him, like, what's going on in your life, and he would open up about struggles. And I feel like as we, I don't want to say healed the emotion side, but as we even just processed
Yeah.
the
Right.
emotional and mental side of what was happening in life, he eventually played his entire senior year without re-injury.
Awesome.
And I think back to him so much, and I remember seeing a turn in his healing and in his rehabilitation as
Yep.
we started to address all of these things.
Yeah.
And towards the end of my full-time sports medicine career, I still do it a little bit, but full-time, I really made a point to try to tune into some of those things, the
Mm,
energy of the injuries, the emotional side of what
yep.
athletes were experiencing. And obviously I can't, dive into it obviously without their permission, but also the
Sure.
setting, you have to be sensitive of the setting. But the more I just kind of gave it a nod and maybe
Mm,
asked or even just reminded them like, hey, take this moment to breathe, or made, nonchalantly kind of move their phone so they weren't just scrolling social media during a
yeah.
treatment.
Right.
And we were able to talk and process it. It really impressed me how much of a change that I felt like I saw during those treatment sessions
Oh,
and
I
the
love.
outcomes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I love that. And for people listening right now, everything that Sarah just explained to us is so true. It's so powerful. So if you have never heard of mind body medicine or energy healing for that matter, how I like to describe it in my own workshop, Sarah, is I describe where we are all human beings, we are all physical beings, we are spiritual beings, but we are energetic beings. And
Absolutely.
we are all states of matter, right? So if just like we learned back in the day in science class in fourth grade, states of matter, everything is energy. So if we are all energy, much like an injury, you mentioned the soccer player's hamstring, the emotional side of us, emotion stands for energy and motion. So if we have an injury, it's kind of like a cluster in a way. It's like there's a stuck energy, there's a trauma there, whatever it might be in whatever form, that the mind is sending to that area. And the more we dive into that and process it, like you said, like you mentioned, you didn't want to necessarily use the word healing. Processing it is healing. It's alleviating
Mm-hmm.
the pressure on an area. And even if it's not fully healed, it's more healed than it was, So it's in the process of healing. So for people listening right now, if that's a new area for you, I urge you, look into it. Google search, look into social media, search someone up, whatever it is. Find Sarah for that matter. But literally, there's so much information on there, and it connects to us. And I think what I am finding more so now than ever, more than ever in our country, it's new age. But if we go to other countries in the world, this is what they've been teaching for millennia now. And it's just allowing us to raise our perspective a little bit to realize that someone else might have an answer that we didn't consider first that could open the door to our healing, to our emotional healing. So whatever trauma it might be, whatever pain it might be, can finally alleviate, and we don't walk around with that hurt hamstring, with the lower back pain. I think a lot of people that I talk to, they have lower back pain, and then if you look at that energetically, it's directly related to stress that we feel we are carrying or we feel we are walking with. Well, if we're carrying this, yes, you don't see anything on someone's back, but your mind tells you it's there. So you feel the stress on your back. I find it so fascinating. So that's why I'm so glad I had you on here. Have you had anyone come to you? Like you mentioned the hamstring. Has there been anyone that has really recognized the work you've helped them through? Like, oh my goodness, who would have thought that just talking to you, I guess you doing your massage work, everything like this, that helped me more than ever. Because I feel like with the role you're in with so many athletes and students and young people, they're able to more than likely open up to you about a lot, right? Do you
Mm-hmm.
find that more
Yeah,
often with your athletes that come to you? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the things I miss a little bit about being a full-time athletic trainer is the relationships. I
Mm,
remember when I did an interview a couple of years ago and somebody asked me what I was most proud of in my career. And I actually teared up. I started crying and I said the
nice.
relationships.
Yeah.
The relationships. I'm still friends with these athletes. I even just the other day sent a friend request to an athlete of mine from probably 12 years ago, and he accepted it within like 20. I think it was like
Awesome.
20 minutes, and I was like, oh, he still cares.
Yeah.
But there's a special bond between athletic trainers and their athletes.
Yeah.
It's I don't think that there's another bond like that.
Mm,
I think that it stems from the amount of time you spend together.
yep.
Also, the amount of time, especially at the collegiate setting, right?
Mm,
You spend a ton of time together, hours every day. And on top of that, you're with them in very vulnerable moments,
mm,
vulnerable moments of injury, but
right.
also vulnerable moments of success and
Yeah.
winning, and
Right.
also loss.
Mm,
Um, and then I think there's also a really special relationship of my sole purpose is to be here to take care of you,
good for you.
right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so once that emotional door is opened, I
Hmm.
think that there's an incredible relationship that can happen there. And I absolutely have had that with so many of my athletes. And I will
Nice.
say,
Yep.
even with some of my students now, on a lesser extent, I think as a professor, um, that there's a little bit less of a pathway for that. But
Mm,
there's still just people you connect with, right? There's
yeah.
still the
Right.
students that if they see my door open, they stop in.
Yeah.
As a team manager, same thing,
Yep.
right? But as an athletic trainer, it's special.
Yeah, right. And I
Yeah.
love how you mentioned your soul's purpose and what you want, whether it's a professor, whether it is athletic trainer in some other area, or from the stages, which we'll get into in a second. But you walk in a higher level energy, in a loving energy, and whether we're going to use the term energy or whatever it is, when you walk in that, as you do, Sarah, these athletes, they come to you and they can relax and they can know they can confide in you, much like your students are starting to do with that door open. That's a credit to you because you've done the inner work yourself to be able to raise your energy, but then walk in that. And I think, I believe on your website, you go over some of your background, everything like that, but you even describe, like, we all have our own energy field, a biofield, and whatnot. And when we are doing our own inner work, our own inner healing, our own processing, belief systems, the whole 9 yards, what we are doing is we are relieving old energy for people listening, and we're allowing new energy, yes, to grow, but you're raising your energy and your aura just a little bit more, which and I think anyone listening right now would know this, when you walk into a room, people recognize. And there are a lot of people that they kind of shy away because they don't want people to recognize. But when someone confident walks into a room, or someone with a smile that lights up the room, why do we even use that terminology? Because something lights up, they bring the energy into the room. That's all energy for people listening right now. And Sarah, you just in our little bit of a conversation we've had for the last 15 minutes or so, it's all apparent. I completely see why athletes, students, people come to you for help, for support, for a conversation, whatever it is, because you walk in that loving energy. So I give there's so much credit there for you. And to see where you've taken that. Now I want to, because you mentioned speaking and whatnot and everything like that, or the team on different levels. Sarah has given a TEDx talk before. And I want you to explain what that was, because on a athlete level, not even just collegiate, athlete level, this is an area that could completely halt a player, a team, or whatever if they don't process it the right way. But on your TEDx talk, you've talked about this more, and that is the topic of a teammate's death. Can you go into that a little bit more? And I know you got your own title and everything for it, but I'll let you explain more on it. But I find it such a fascinating topic, and how you've done a TEDx on it.
Thank you. I just got goosebumps because this is a very, very passionate topic for me. And I will say, I believe that this topic expands beyond athletics. When we talk about teammate death, we are in teams in many areas in our life. Yes, in athletics, but also at school, at work, in families.
Right.
You know, we are in teams all over, and teammate death can happen to any of those teams. So this topic came from personal experience of mine. Back when I already mentioned working collegiate ice hockey, we had a death of an athlete during a game towards the beginning of my career. It was only 3 years into my career. And then 2 years after that happened, our assistant coach was murdered in a obviously totally separate incident. But having these two experiences 2 years apart, back to back, with very much the same team, right? We had a little bit of a turnover in 2 years, but not a ton. I learned a lot. And especially being a new athletic trainer, I remember really grasping at anything I could to try to get some guidance here. This was, to age myself a little bit, this was before social media was big. So really all I knew was to reach out to my mentors and those that were close to me.
For sure.
And so many times they would say, Sarah, I haven't actually lost one in my hands. And so I don't know what that's like, but we support you. And I'll say it almost ended my career, which is interesting to look at from 25 years later, to look back. But it changed my life. And I say that at the end of my talk, like losing one of my athletes changed me forever.
Yeah.
But I also know that with preparation, we can progress through the grief and into healing that can happen after losing a teammate. And so my talk is really focused on how to prepare for this. Because when we do lose a teammate and we do have that immediate grief that comes with it, that's completely, understandable and natural.
For sure.
That is not the time to be figuring out how to handle it. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so this talk is definitely geared more towards people in an administrative role, but it's also very applicable for athletes as well.
Yeah.
Just to know, just to be aware, just to have the awareness of what we can do. And in my talk, I briefly tell the story. TEDx talks are very short. So I do all this and I think it's like 11 minutes. It's very short. And when I presented on this topic at different conferences, then it turns into like an hour-long conversation. And we're able to dive into it more. But I focus on three main things, which is making sure that there's an emergency action plan in place. And even if it's, that's usually a sports medicine emergency action plan, right? Like who's going to administer CPR? Who's going to call paramedics? But it doesn't have to be that. It can just be, what is your plan?
Yeah.
right? Even
Right.
if someone, heaven forbid, one of your colleagues passes away, what's the plan? Who's
Yeah.
going to notify people?
Hmm.
That's one of the things I look back on. It was really important to me. Jackson Logan is my athlete that died during our game, and his brother had been on the team before that for 4 years.
Mm.
And so I was very close to his brother, Dustin.
Okay.
And I remember walking out of the emergency room, trying to gather my thoughts and calling Dustin, who was living in Alaska at the time. So there's a little bit of a time difference.
Wow.
And the call went to voicemail. And I remember saying, Dustin, call me before you call anyone else back. I want you
Yeah.
to hear this from me.
Yeah.
And so even just thinking through, if something like this happens, who's going to notify people?
Right.
How is that notification going to go out?
For sure.
Is an email appropriate? I know that in the athletic setting, obviously with Jackson dying during the game, everybody knew. But when our coach was murdered, we called an emergency team meeting and brought everyone to the ice rink.
Yeah.
I don't think an email or a text would have been appropriate in that setting. So even just thinking through, how are we going to handle this? What are the notifications going to be? What is the response going to be? Now we have social media to think about. We have media. We had news crews at our practices and games after both of these incidents.
Yeah.
So just thinking through these things, having a plan. Okay, that's the first one.
For sure.
The second one is recognizing that everybody grieves differently and allowing space for that grief to happen.
Right.
I give examples in my TEDx talk of some people may want to wear a memorial patch. Other people may need time away from the sport. Other people may need to get right back to practicing so that they are with everybody and that their life has some normalcy to it.
Yeah.
Other people may want a moment of silence before games. Other people may want to hang a banner in the rafters. Like all of these things are appropriate. And to acknowledge everybody's grieving styles and make everybody feel like they have a place at this table of grieving, we need to try to do as many of these as we possibly can.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of that is I also say that those in management roles often grieve last. And this is because we're trying to take care of our teams first.
Sure. Yeah.
So then by the time we feel like our team's okay and we start to let ourselves grieve, we feel like everybody else has moved on and maybe we're the one with the wet blanket now. Or maybe we just need to hurry up and get over it.
Right.
And so I ask people very pointedly, please check in with your coaches and staff because they're going to be dealing with this long after everybody else has started to heal and move on. So that's part of that individual grieving. And then the third really big important piece is to have an environment with psychological and emotional safety.
Nice.
So that you can grieve. And I talk about how we can't have yelling coaches. We can't have fear-based motivation because then when we do need to switch into this is a safe space to grieve, you can't flip that switch.
Yeah.
Like that does not happen. And so this has to be a safe environment for everybody from the get-go, because then when these tragic situations happen, then we can transition into that mode, right? And it's not that big of a switch. It's not a leap. It's not now it's all warm and fuzzy and feely, because it has been a safe space, and that needs to happen right from the very beginning.
For sure. Wow. That's very fascinating. And I agree with you. That's a need for every area, whether it is administration, whether it is athletes, families. I 100% agree with you. That's across the board. I used to work in a therapy field, and we'd always have every single new client we got, whether it was a family or an individual, we'd have to create a plan out, just as you said. So if something happens, they can handle it, their family can handle it, the school can handle it, and step in and help, whether it's grief, whether it's anger management, whatever it is under the sun, but to make sure something's in place. So for what you bring with this message, it's so empowering, but it opens people up to be able to understand this perspective. Because as much as not many people may have lost a teammate, not many people, but people at some point in their life will lose someone. So to be able to look at that and realize like, oh, wow, it might not be a topic I want to think on or want to talk about, but it's a topic that most likely will happen. So to be able to prep people for, whether it is a workplace setting, a teammate setting, or an individual setting, it's so necessary. So one thing you said that stuck out to me is, like, you went through this. Like, this is where this talk came. This is what's impact, this again, light that you're shining to people. Like, that shows, one, your soul's purpose, but it shows the strength of your soul to be able to, one, choose this path, but to be able to then take it and then essentially transcend it and transform it to be able to help other people. That, again, I give you so much credit for, because that's something that you have chosen. You're allowing yourself to process and go through. But you mentioned going over that, how administration or management, as you said, is usually the last to be able to go through the grieving process. Since this happened to you, how were you able to go through that process? Most likely after the fact, and maybe with a couple people at the same time. But maybe there's someone listening right now that doesn't know how to go through that process and is struggling with it. How did you go through that yourself to be able to at least pick your head up again and keep on moving forward, we'll say?
Yeah. Um, I will say, if I can just give a nod or a shout out real fast, when I applied to give this TEDx talk and then it was accepted,
Hmm.
before I initially essentially signed on the dotted line,
Yeah.
I called both Jackson's family and then
Mhm.
Ken's widow, and said, I want this to be part of our story, but I will not get on that stage without your permission. This is
Mhm.
our story.
Yeah.
And then when my TEDx talk was finally published and released, and I sent them links, and I said, "Thank you for letting this be part of our story,
It's awesome.
because we have this group story now. We have this continuing story the rest of our lives, and
Yeah.
this bond." So so yeah, it has been important to me to try to do good with this, and I've known that we would do that for a long time. I didn't know what path that would take, but it
Mm,
has brought a lot of fulfillment for me
it's
to
awesome.
do that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, when kind of circling back to when you said, how have I processed through that? Part of that was a long time ago. I said,
Mhm.
eventually I want to launch the Jackson Logan Foundation
Nice.
that
Mm,
supports people through situations like this. And I have not launched that particular foundation yet. I'm
okay.
still trying to figure out what I want that to look like.
Yeah.
Right now I call my work, I call it the black patch, because usually
Okay.
you wear a black memorial patch
Yeah.
when you have an athlete death. Um, but I think when that eventually happens, that'll definitely be pulling in his family more. And I picture athletic scholarships and all sorts of things. So I've kind of dreamt about that along the way. In the moment, I always forget what the movie is. I think it's Minority Report, where he's
Okay.
like, everything's on the window with like all the lines between things, and he's like having to put together the whole puzzle. Is that the right
Right. Yeah.
movie? I don't
With
know.
Tom Cruise, right? I think.
Yeah.
Yep. I know it's exactly
But
it.
I very much did a version of that after
Okay.
Jackson's death.
Yeah.
Jackson
Okay.
died due to a diagnosis called commotio cordis, which is actually Damar Hamlin's same diagnosis, who had a great result. We did not.
Mm,
But I did a ton of research and essentially had to prove to myself that we did everything we could have done to
yeah.
save this 18-year-old that
Right.
we were not able to save. And
Mm,
it was really important to me. I remember meeting with the physician. I remember talking with the EMS crew. I had stacks and stacks of printed off research articles on commotio cordis. I called and I got the EMS transcript of when the 911 call came in. When did the ambulance arrive? Like, I was calculating it down to the seconds and then comparing that with the research, and I had to prove to myself that it
yeah.
wasn't my fault,
Mm, yeah.
right? That this was just a statistical thing.
Yeah.
That it wasn't my fault, and
Yeah.
that was really important. I'm tearing up even now thinking
Mm,
about it,
yeah.
because
I completely understand.
as an athletic trainer, my job is to keep him safe and to keep him
Exactly.
alive
Mm,
at the very, base of it.
for sure.
And I didn't.
Mm,
And not only me, but the paramedics that were on site at the
right.
time, our head coach was a paramedic.
Yeah.
And so it was actually his crew that responded. And it was Jackson actually got fantastic care just due to a
Mm,
bunch of things that all pieced together. The fact that paramedics were able to show up and look at their fellow paramedic on their shift and say, here's the kit, do whatever
yeah.
you need. I mean, he got epinephrine super fast. He got immediate CPR, like all these things. And we
Yeah.
still couldn't save him.
Mm,
Um, I had to really prove to myself that I was still a good athletic trainer,
yeah. Mm,
and that I deserved to stay in this field, and not only deserved to, but that I should stay in
mm,
this field.
right.
And
Yeah.
now, being 25 years later, I know that I have always been a really good athletic trainer, even in that really traumatic experience.
Good for you. Yeah.
Um, that was the first thing.
Yeah.
That was the first part of healing, was I had
Yeah.
to get past that, and
Yeah.
past it. I mean, I'm going to do air quotes here. You just saw me cry
I get it.
talking
Yeah.
about it.
Right.
Like, it's still there. It's still raw. He died in 2005. I mean,
Mm, yeah.
it's been a long time.
For sure.
Um, Another big part of it was I remember doing a lot of somatic processing.
Okay.
One of my massage therapists who we had on the medical staff with the hockey team, His name is Jason Marquardson. I need to find him again and probably send him a link to this because I've never forgotten his kindness.
Yeah.
He was an incredible massage therapist for our team, but he also reached out and he said, I don't know how to support you right now. The only thing I can offer is a massage. Does that feel helpful?
Mm,
And I remember saying, yeah, actually.
good for you.
And I laid on his table and we cried together during that
Mm,
massage.
yeah.
I processed out loud during that massage. And
Mhm.
just having his support was incredibly helpful. I know we did multiple massages. I've
Yeah.
always been a massage girl my entire life, but that
Yeah,
was very helpful. I think processing somatically was really important.
for sure.
And then I also remember I got a ring. It was a thick silver band
Okay.
that I wore on my middle finger for a long, long, long time. And I
Yeah.
had Jackson's information
Mm,
engraved on the inside of it.
yeah.
The team really grabbed on to one of his sayings, which was rock on. And
Okay.
so the saying was rock on, Jackson, rock on. And I did his uh, birthday and his death date in there. And I wore that ring for a very long time. I will say until my body changed,
Okay.
but it's still in my jewelry box.
Mhm.
Um, and my mom even noticed. She said, I recognized that when you started wearing that ring, you really were able to just kind of start moving through your days a little bit better. And
Yeah.
it was a way that I felt like he was with me. One of the things that was really hard for me was this 18-year-old,
Mhm.
he's from Alaska. He loved a snow machine. He was obviously an athlete. He
Mhm.
was a hunter. He was full of life.
Yeah.
And I really struggled knowing that he wasn't able to continue to do that.
Mm,
And so by being able to take him with me through my days, like literally on my finger, is
right.
how I pictured it. And there were a lot of things I would do in his name that were
Nice.
sometimes like a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but I'm like, well, we're going to do this for Jackson. We're going to swim in the
That's
ocean
awesome.
for Jackson. We're going to, whatever it may be, because I'm not a
Yeah.
super risk taker in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was another like really big turning point for me, was just
Awesome.
finding a personal way. And I think this all goes back to finding those individual ways to grieve, right?
Yeah.
But finding a
Exactly.
personal way to take him with me day after day after day, because that felt meaningful to me.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I appreciate your realism in this because it's happened. And for people listening, it like we said before, it could have happened and whatnot. But all the areas you just gave us, Sarah, are 100% tools for people to use to help themselves through the grieving process. And I love the fact that you had the ring. You still do, like you said, it's in your jewelry box and everything like that. I have a former client of mine. She might be listening right now, Alexis. She's a grief coach, and
Mm-hmm.
so we worked years ago, but she lost her husband, and it took her so long to be able to process that and be able to heal with that. But one area that always stuck out is they're never really gone, and you're able to take them with you, as you said, with a ring, but to believe that they're with you allows you to realize that they're closer than ever. And as you said, he's
Mm-hmm.
always on your finger with you when you wear the ring and whatnot. And to realize that from a higher perspective or a spiritual perspective, they can help you at any moment. And that's new for people to grasp. I think in this age, we're learning to raise our vibration and be able to grasp that. But when someone passes on, they're closer than ever now, and that's a blessing. As much as it
Mm-hmm.
comes in a very tough moment, it's a major blessing once the healing process allows you to accept it. But I think all those areas, people listening, take one if you need it right now and utilize it. And I think the most powerful one, Sarah, is number one that you described, being able to get to a place where you can accept that your efforts, everything you did, was all you could do.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I'd say, probably the toughest one for people to be able to get to, because we're humans. We think there's always something else we can do. We're perfectionists. We want to be able to be the best at what we do. We want to help people, but it could be someone like, I can even connect to that with my grandfather. I can remember all of us sitting around the deathbed when like it was his time to go. And every family member at that time, the entire room filled, was processing it differently. And some of us, we understand it, we accept it, and we can not move past it, not move on quickly, but we accept it with a smile rather than a breakdown. But then others accept it with a breakdown because they need to let that energy out. But for
Right.
people listening right now, take one of the points that Sarah made and utilize it for yourself. Whether it is a grieving process with someone passing, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something else where you need to accept the fact and be able to heal, not move on, but heal through it, because it can, as Sarah, as your story even shows us, it empowered your purpose and your passion even further. You now take him with you, yes, on the ring, but you now take him with you And he is now an even greater guiding light that you now bring to athletes, that you now bring to audiences, that you now bring to students, because he's always in your corner. And because you went through that, you gained strength, you gained armor in a way to be able to move forward, because now your purpose has even grown because you went through it. And, in certain coaching sessions, this comes up and whatnot. But when we look at it through new eyes, through eyes that see, ears that hear, but when we look at it through new eyes, we're able to process it from a whole different perspective, where it's like, if I didn't go through that, if that didn't happen to all of us involved, if we didn't grow through it together, we wouldn't have been as close together, but we wouldn't have the messages now that now impact all these people, that now impact the world, that now impact everyone because of that. I think that's how we always start to see that all things do work together, as tough as that really is to accept in the moment. It's empowering if we allow it to be. But Sarah, I appreciate your realness in going over that, and your TEDx talk. You mentioned there's a link. Heck, we'll put the link at the end of this video or in the description for people to go watch, because I'm sure it's even more empowering. As much as you said TEDx talk, which has to be 10 minutes or lesser sometimes, I'm sure it's so empowering. But I thank you so much for explaining that to us. That's awesome. Yeah.
I was very honored to be able to speak on that topic.
Yeah.
Being able to tell our story to potentially help other people has been really important to me. So it's been a great honor.
Oh, that's a healing factor in itself, to be able to speak it out, and share it to others, and then if, as the foundation comes together, because I'll say, like, you even know it's coming together. It's a future puzzle piece coming together. If it's Black Patch or whatever name you end up calling it, heck, we'll have you back on. We'll spread the word, but we'll spread it with you, because it's such an empowering message, but it's something that the world needs. And I think it's a part of the world that we tend to overlook, because, as you said, people grieve in their own way, and some people, they close off to the grieving. And as if we want to connect it to what we started this topic on, this interview on, mind, body, medicine, sometimes when we don't allow ourselves to grieve and we hold on to it, it can turn into hamstring pain. It can turn to back pain. It can turn to some aspect in the body. But no, I think it's incredible, Sarah, to transition to that healing process. Going over as one last area I want to touch on is healing in itself. And on your website, I even wrote down this quote on your website. You have, healing is multidimensional. We are far more than physical beings. We have a soul, an energetic force, a dynamic mind, and emotions that all play a role in how we physically show up in this life. And you feel strongly that all these aspects must be acknowledged for true healing, and each of us is in charge of our own healing. Touch on that for us, because when I read that on your website, I thought that was so empowering, but it's the truest words about healing. One, it's on us. I think a lot of us go to someone else, but they're the guide. They're meant to teach us. That's why I said at the start, like, she's a guide, she's a healer, but she's meant to guide us to our own healing. Yeah. Touch on that quote for us for a little bit, because I think it's so powerful.
Thank you for reading that quote back to me. It's been a while since I wrote the copy for my website, and I'm like, dang, that's a pretty good quote.
There you go. Who's the author?
I know, I was sorry to say that. Dang. I'm impressed. Like I said, going back to, my experience with athletes, from the very beginning, I knew they were more than athletic machines, right? Yep. I was raised in a home where my mom was a midwife, for lack of a better term, and my dad was a paramedic, and so a very medically based home, but on two different ends of the Western medicine spectrum, if you would say. Yeah. I was raised in a home where we did a lot of chiropractic care and massage and homeopathy and other complementary modalities or traditional modalities. And at the same time had a good mix of allopathic and Western medicine as well. So ever since I was little, I've definitely been tuned into that this is a much bigger spectrum than just the physical body.
Yeah, for sure.
In our family, we call it the book. It's literally almost like the Bible, but it's the book. And it's a book called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And it's one of the books that I throw out in the series of books that are all about how our body holds on to these things, right? And the first one that's more science-based, I would say, is The Body Keeps the Score, which can be a very hard read. So if you're interested in this, just know that can be a hard read, because he tells a lot of stories and talks about a lot of intense trauma, especially at the beginning. Yeah. The first time I read that book, I skipped to the end, where it was more of the science and not the storytelling.
Gotcha.
Excuse me. And then I would say a little bit more into the the feeling side of it and maybe more of the wooey is that book of Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And it's this concept, like you've been saying, of when you stuff them in, like these things manifest in our body. But in that book, there's a whole series of, it's a list where you can look up a physical ailment and it'll tell you the feeling associated with it.
Wow. Okay.
So like I've struggled with knees my whole life. I actually just had a knee replacement like 6 months ago. And, you know, in my early 40s, which is, you know, I've struggled with my knees for a long time. And my family sometimes will be like, well, what does the book say? Like, that's really what and so we'll go and we'll grab it. And knees are feeling unsupported. Wow. Okay. This is something that I've had to look at in my life, right? Like, again, I'm being very vulnerable here, but I think that vulnerability is a great teacher.
For sure.
And so I will tell you that as the oldest daughter of 6 children, and the different things that have happened through our life and our family, and then my adult life as well, a feeling of being unsupported is something that I have had to step through and navigate my entire life. And so I'm not surprised that that is what is associated with this. And this is what's manifesting in my body.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So another really great book, if you're scribbling down book recommendations, I just finished the book. Stephanie is her first name. I forget her last name. I apologize. But the book is called What My Bones Know. And it's about complex PTSD, also about how it manifests in the body. And it is a phenomenal book. It's written more of as a memoir. So it reads more like a novel with some research thrown in at the end. Phenomenal book as well. But so I was raised in this family where it was, well, you've had a nosebleed every night for a week. What does the book say about nosebleeds? Well, it says feelings of being overlooked. So when you have a child and you're like, oh, are you feeling overlooked? And then sure enough, we'd give my brother a lot of attention. And how was your day? And tell me about school and all these things. And his nosebleeds go away.
Wow.
Coincidence? I don't know. It's worked in my life. Right? It's worked in my life. So all this to say, I was raised this way, but then also then going into a profession that is in medicine and is in healing and is in I definitely went in with that lens and then had to figure out for myself as an athletic trainer, you know, I was trained with all these Western medicine allopathic skills. But then I also was known fairly early in my career. Once I started to get a little bit more confident, then I started doing things, I call it scraping, which is now also could be Graston or instrument assisted massage. I learned it as gua sha. So I really appreciate you earlier giving the nod to there's been cultures that have been doing this for thousands of years because I say I learned gua sha, which is a Asian technique that's been, you know, and I learned it while I was working US Taekwondo, right? Same with cupping. I remember I did cupping way before Michael Phelps made it cool, you know, so I've always kind of taken a lot of these things into account. I've also done training in energy work, and I'm a Reiki master, and I would utilize that in my body work with my athletes. You know, not saying like we're going to do a Reiki session, but like I said, like anytime you're doing body work, you can do these things. And so I very much got into the complementary modalities as an athletic trainer. And I would say probably known for that a little bit more so than others. Awesome. But also, like I mentioned earlier in our conversation, that I think that medicine in general is starting to be more accepting of this. And not only accepting, but the research is catching up, right? Research is catching up on a lot of these modalities, which is giving it more credit or more credibility. And I think there's also a really big aspect of people are just kind of sick of just like straightforward, like, oh, this is wrong, take this pill. Like people want to know what the other options are for their healthcare. And so they're really seeking out these other complementary modalities to try to handle these things in different ways.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I agree with you tenfold that people are looking to different ways because it's the generation that was just take a pill, you know, one pill fits all, you know, that's beginning to fade. But in it beginning to fade for people listening right now, that's opening all of us up to realize that we can heal ourselves in different modalities. But the modality is the vehicle to get you to the healing. But the vehicle to get you to the healing is to get you to realize that you are the healer. You know, and you know, as much as I said that at the start of this video, Sarah's a guide and a healer. As I said before, she is guiding you to healing yourself. And that's, you know, you mentioned Reiki and everything. You're a Reiki master and all this kind of stuff. I am used to be just as you used to be like, oh, I don't know about these areas. But then you open yourself up and realize, okay, now I can understand it. Because coming from a faith background, when you pray on someone, lay hands on someone, that's essentially Reiki. And then when you take it through the new lens of that terminology, it's like we all are meant to be able to heal people, and we all have a gift because we all are energy to be able
Mm-hmm.
to heal people. And then you see it happen or you do it yourself, like, that's it's that aha moment. It's a Satori moment, as they say, where that light bulb goes off and it's like all the insight kind of finally connects, and it's like, oh my goodness, now I understand. But all the experiences we go through in life are leading you to these moments to show you you are where you're supposed to be and you're on the right path. So your entire background, Sarah, there's the fact that you grew up and around all of these forms of healing, to see where you have taken that to where you are now. I hope you do not deny that you are exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You know, as you mentioned, your soul's purpose, your soul's passion, everything. I want to throw one other modality out there that I learned. I don't know if you've heard of Michael Beckwith. He's someone that I go to for spiritual. He's all over YouTube. He's got his master classes, the whole 9 yards. But he runs the Agape Spiritual Life Center in California, and fascinating everything. But when I took his first master class, I was going through a very tough time in my own life, depressed, anxious, like not knowing where my life was, and took his master class. And he goes over, which people can look up on YouTube right now, what is called energetic shapeshifting. And first time I heard that terminology, I was like, that's just so much. Like, what is that? Like, it just kind of blew me away. And he describes it where, say, one of us has my left knee is in so much pain. My right knee is totally fine, but my left knee is in so much pain. And it's just all you're thinking about is the pain, like the chronic pain, the aches, everything from this left knee. And you realize, you take a step back, you realize that your right knee is in perfect form, it's in perfect health. Since we are all energy, what we can do, thanks to the power of our mind and how it essentially directs everything consciously and unconsciously, we think on how healthy our right knee is. And we can actually, you can use your hands, you can like put your hand on your knee and you essentially like guide the good energy to your left knee where the bad energy is, and you're transferring it, energetic shapeshifting. You're taking the good energy and adding it to where the bad energy, negative energy, whatever you want to put on it is. And in that regard, you can actually begin to heal the pain from your other knee based off of all of you had at your fingertips. And when I started to hear that, study and understand it from an energetic perspective, from a meditative perspective, I was so fascinated. I'm like, oh my goodness, like it even furthered me away from the pill aspect, because I'm like, it's all here. It's all at our fingertips, but we are being directed in a different way. But I just find it so fascinating. So I throw that out to you to look into, because it adds to everything you've added. You're a Reiki master. You probably do that in your own form as it is. But to know we all can do it, you can see it in my face. I get so excited about it. It's so cool.
Yeah. Home form for sure. I like to say I don't necessarily practice Reiki as it's in its traditional form, but I do practice energy work or energy medicine, and because it is such an individual thing, right?
Right.
But it was important to me to learn it in the traditional form. I that probably comes from my higher ed background, but I always say, like, you need to learn all the rules before you can know how to bend them.
True.
And so that was important to me. But yes, I definitely do things, I would say a little bit different in my own way, but I think we all need to do that, right?
Yes.
It's all very individual. And going back to healing yourself, if I can for a moment, it's, I remember as I feel like I really came into my own as a medical practitioner, I would give options to my athletes or to clients that I was working with. And I would say, this is what I think will be helpful. How does this sound to you? Or here are 2 or 3 different options. Do any of those resonate more with you?
Good for you. Yeah.
And I think that and I was obviously offering options that were, that weren't contraindicated, right? That were applicable to the issue that we were trying to address, that were appropriate, But I also think it's really important for ourselves as a patient to take ownership of that and take ownership of our healing. And I see this with this generation that's coming up, is we no longer want to go step into a doctor's office and be told what to do.
True.
We want to understand what's happening. We want to have ownership of what we choose to do about it. And we want to do something that feels right for us. And that's part of that healing yourself, right?
Yeah. Right.
Is really taking ownership for it. And and I see that shift happening, and I want to empower that shift. And I think that that's the role of a true healer, if you will, is to empower that person in healing, to give them the tools to do so, and maybe support the tools, provide the tools, but they're the ones in charge of this.
It's true, right? I agree with that so much. And just, I love that you essentially open them up like, hey, which one resonates most with you? Because that, whatever they choose, I'd even do that with my clients, not on a healing form, but a lot of people come to me and they're trying to figure out what their purpose is, what their dream is, their goals are. And like, all right, make a list. I'm like, all right, we'll go down. Which one resonates the most in this one moment? What they're most passionate about. Like, oh, I get so excited. Your excitement's going to guide you to the path you're supposed to be on. So in a healing form, like you said, you put these, hey, there's 3 options in front of you. Which one do you feel is best? For people listening, whichever one would resonate with you, I believe, is your higher self, your intuition guiding you to the step you're supposed to take. Whichever one will help you the most in a healing form, or a purpose or a goal or a dream or whatever decision someone has to make. So I think that's incredible, Sarah. I love that you do that. I want to transition aside. I know I've kept you for almost an hour now, but
You're good. I'm enjoying it.
Perfect. I'm glad. As we start to transition this out, a couple last questions, but you do keynotes, you do workshops, you do mentoring for people. Tell us a little bit about that in case someone wants to reach out to you. What's this all about that you can kind of give us more information on?
Yeah, well, I've been a teacher my entire life in one form or another. And so I love, sharing messages, especially ones that I'm passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
So I've spoken at a lot of workshops or conferences over the years on a variety of different topics, a lot of them that we've talked about here today. Recently, I'm talking more about this concept of preparing for teammate death and the grieving and the healing that can happen there. But yeah, pretty much in any of these topics or anything on my website. But I love to speak. I love to connect with people, to share things that are meaningful and that will help them in the future. I also really love workshops too. I've done quite a few workshops. Those are just so much more intimate. Those keynotes or those conference presentations, sure, you're up on a stage, you're often behind a podium, and or I'm a walker, so I usually ask for so I can walk around. But workshops, we get to sit together and talk, usually for a couple days in a row, and I really love those too. So those are fun. I have a couple coming up in September and October, and I'm really looking forward to those.
Nice.
But then also as a mentor, and I also have it on my website, especially, I do just have general mentoring, but also I wanted to mention, we also do have a way for you to connect if you are either wanting to prepare for teammate death or if you are experiencing it and you need support. That support is always open and available, and that's a great way to find me. I like to say my last name is really unique, so you can find me with a simple Google search, but just send a request because we want to support others in that way.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And I agree with you with the workshop. That's what I mostly do, workshops for colleges and companies, because it's, as you said, it's intimate. You're there. You can ask the right questions. It's no longer just me up there talking. It's like we can actually delve into this information. I always think that's the best. But it sounds like people can do that with you in all these forms, whether it is one-to-one mentoring or being able to prepare for a teammate death, something aspect like that. So people listening, Sarah's website, your LinkedIn, everything's going to be in the credits of this video. It's going to be in the YouTube description. But Sarah, tell us that, where can they find you? What is your website? What is it? LinkedIn? Are there any other areas they can contact you? Give us all that right now before we kind of close everything out.
Yeah, LinkedIn is great under Dr. Sara Murray, or actually it's Dr. Sara Beaudry-Wiltse on LinkedIn. My website is drsaramarie.com, doctor being Dr. saramurray.com. That's also my Instagram. And currently don't have a Facebook. I just find my demographic really isn't there. So we're on Instagram. But like I said, a quick Google search will find us, or will find me because my name is unique. So don't hesitate to reach out. And I think that some of the most powerful work that I've been doing lately are these conversations around this holistic healing, around preparing for teammate death or grief. Also student wellness. I have some big contracts right now in supporting students with holistic wellness for college students and also medical students. Really just this concept of like, you're more than just a student, and for you to be successful, not only in your academics, but in life, we need to be supporting you holistically. And so whether that's working directly with students and teaching them how to care for themselves holistically, or even better, I love to work with faculty and staff and coaches and sports medicine staffs to really, because they're the ones that have to create this container, right? They're the ones that have to create this environment for these students and these athletes to allow for these things to happen. So I love to get it at that stage and work with them on how to create this.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. I love that. So everyone, you're going to see all of her links in the YouTube description. You're going to see in the credits. I'm going to be tagging her throughout. Now that you said you have Instagram, I'll tag you in all these posts for this message. So everyone will be able to find that on my Instagram just as much. But one last question, Sarah, before we close everything out, what is a lasting message that you want to leave with everyone?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, right? Let's save the biggest one for the
end. What's resonating with me right now and what's coming up in my own life, but that I also feel is just so important for everyone is to listen to yourself and trust yourself in your knowing on how to step through your life and the experiences that you have in your life. Like we have this inner knowing. We know when we tune into our own principles and the things that are important to us, we often know how we want to step through. And I don't want to discredit education and mentoring and learning from other people and getting input from people that you respect and that support you. But I also, I want people to really trust in themselves.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Like trust in yourself that you know what's best for you and that you know what's best for the situations that you're up against. Trust in yourself that you can live a life that you are happy in and that you are fulfilled in. And that might not look like what somebody else thinks it should look like. And that's okay.
Exactly.
Trust in yourself.
Yeah. Oh, it's a perfect ending to this video. Perfect period. But Sara, I thank you so much for being here. Everyone listening right now, take that message to heart. Trust yourself. Go back in this video if you need to learn more about the key topics we talked about. But I'm telling you, reach out to Sara if you have questions. If you're interested in the mentoring, reach out to her. If you're interested in a keynote, a workshop, whatever it is, she's providing all this for audiences, for you as an individual. Reach out to her with a question. I guarantee she's going to help you. But Sara, I thank you so much for being here. Everyone watching and listening right now, please like this message on YouTube and hit that thumbs up button below. If at any moment someone popped in your mind when Sara and I were talking, to me, that is a clear-cut sign that that person needs to hear this message to help them. Not to share Sara, not to share me, but for you to lend a hand out and help someone that might need it. Share this message to them to lend a hand and help them. And please subscribe to Once a Week if you have not already. That number is going up every single week, so we're helping more people. That is the goal of our entire channel. And if you need a coach, head to BillyGLifeCoaching.com and set up a free call with me. I'll be right there for you. We can dive into these areas discussed or even deeper areas too that you might be struggling with. But again, Sara, I thank you so much for being here. Everyone, go check Sara out. She brings so much to the table. Thanks, guys. Awesome.
Thanks so much, Billy.
Of course. I'll see you guys.
You know I've been around and doing it, but now it's my time to shine and start proving it. I'm losing it, I'm moving it. The city is where I'm made, Bostonian flow, I kick it a back day. Yeah, I got game, God in a fan way. We the city of the champs, every sport we play. Spit wetter than the harbor, yeah, I'm flowing like the Charles. I be speeding on this beat, call it Turnpike Miles. Yeah, it's Boo signing on, John to the Hancock, and I'm always key, I'm ready to unlock.